A 7-foot-tall fence may not be too little, but it is certainly too late. Workers installed a barrier around the Capitol a day after a mob of domestic terrorists who call themselves patriots caused a deadly riot in the name of Donald Trump. Removal from office, the growing calls from both Democrats and Republicans to get President Trump out before he can cause any more damage, even with only 13 days left in office. Many in Congress putting the blame directly on Trump for the melee, his closest allies breaking from him while multiple cabinet members and White House officials resign. The new pictures and video show the attack unfold, piecing together the timeline minute by minute. What we're learning about the identities of those in the mob and concerns that the violence is empowering far-right extremists and white nationalists to commit further acts. Security failure examining what didn't happen that could have prevented the deadly violence. How were Capitol Police so unprepared for a protest they knew was coming? Double standard, and why so many Americans are outraged over the lack of a police response after a summer when many peaceful protesters met with sheer force. And while Washington is in an uproar, more Americans died today than any other day since the Civil War. More than 4,000 lives lost in the last 24 hours from the coronavirus and its relentless spread across this country. Behind me are the faces of all of the 147 Republican lawmakers, 8 senators, and 139 members of the House who voted to overturn election results in the middle of the night on one of the darkest days in this country's history. Their objections came just a few hours after anarchists and thugs stormed the U.S. Capitol, and despite the fact that the results had been certified by all 50 states, that dozens of judges found no evidence of fraud, and that the results were confirmed by multiple election officials on both sides of the aisle as a free and fair election. But just before dawn, and on the very floor anarchists briefly took over hours earlier, the other 387 members of Congress confirmed Joe Biden as the next president of the United States, a vote Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the most important in his 36-year career. Tonight, coupled with anger and sadness, questions remain about how scenes like this were allowed to happen, a noose hanging from a makeshift gallows, and why Capitol Police, with a budget of roughly $500 million, seemingly let it all play out. The president has not spoken publicly in more than 24 hours, though a White House spokesperson has condemned the rioters. Trump has not offered anything close to a condemnation. Many in his own party now accuse him of inciting this behavior, and members of his own cabinet have begun to resign. Tonight, there's even talk among Republicans of if this president, with just 13 days left in his presidency, should be removed from office. Our Jonathan Carl leads us off.
They're coming for you!
As his supporters swarmed the Capitol building, President Trump was in the White House watching it all unfold on television. ABC News has learned that the mayor of Washington called the Pentagon pleading for help. Desperate, she then reached out to the president's advisors. At the same time, congressional leaders made the request to Vice President Mike Pence. But Trump praised his supporters even as he told them to go home.
So go home. We love you. You're very special.
Tonight, the White House press secretary said the president condemns the violence, but Democrats in Congress are calling on Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president by a vote of his cabinet because he is mentally unfit.
And by inciting sedition, as he did yesterday, he must be removed from office. While it's only 13 days left, any day can be a horror show for America.
If that doesn't happen, Democrats say he should be impeached, an option some Republicans in Congress are privately discussing as well, according to multiple Republican sources. And members of the president's cabinet have had detailed conversations about the 25th Amendment, according to sources familiar with the discussions, although it is considered unlikely to happen. Today, former Chief of Staff John Kelly said he would vote to remove his old boss.
I think the cabinet should meet and discuss this. What happened on Capitol Hill yesterday is a direct result of his, poisoning the minds of people with the lies and the frauds.
Today, one cabinet official resigned, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, wife of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. She said what happened yesterday, quote, deeply troubled me in a way that I simply cannot set aside. Former members of the Trump administration placed blame squarely on President Trump. Former Attorney General Bill Barr, a staunch Trump loyalist before he left office 2 weeks ago, said, quote, orchestrating a mob to pressure Congress is inexcusable. The president's conduct yesterday was a betrayal of his office and his supporters. And scathing words from former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, who said after Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th, quote, Mr. Trump will deservedly be a man without a country. There's also been a reckoning among Trump loyalists in Congress. Outgoing Senator Kelly Loeffler had planned to object to Biden's electoral votes, but changed her mind after the Capitol riot.
There can be no disagreement that upholding democracy is the only path to preserving our republic. I yield the floor.
As the senators applauded her decision to abandon the president, so did Vice President Pence. Still, more than half of House Republicans voted to overturn the election, and so did a handful of Republican senators, including Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, who was seen raising a fist in solidarity with Trump supporters shortly before they stormed the Capitol.
This is the moment the siege began. A violent mob of Trump supporters swarming the entrance to the Capitol grounds. Overwhelming police officers knocking barricades to the ground and surging towards the seat of American democracy. A Trump flag waving in the air. USA! They converged on the Capitol, scaling the scaffolding, surging ahead amid clouds of tear gas, taunting, screaming, swearing, hurtling themselves towards police, again quickly overpowering them, smashing windows, climbing inside, and flooding the hallways of the Capitol. A reporter from ITV in the thick of the melee.
What's the purpose of storming Congress itself?
Because they work for us. They don't get to steal it from us.
They broke into the office of the Speaker of the House, holding up the sign they had smashed. This man carrying off the Speaker's podium itself. And Richard Barnett of Arkansas putting his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk and then making off with an envelope with her letterhead.
I didn't steal it. I'll put a quarter on her desk, even though she ain't worth it.
For Congress members themselves, hours of sheer terror. Pelosi and Vice President Mike Pence whisked to safety. Lawmakers barricaded inside the chamber. Officers with guns drawn, trying to keep the rioters out. Members ultimately filing out, rushing down the stairs, some wearing gas masks over their heads to protect themselves, seeking shelter in their offices.
We heard them outside. We were concerned they were going to break down the door. And I picked up a baseball bat. That's all I had to protect myself in the event they broke into the office.
As the violence and looting continues, one of the women was shot dead by police as she tried to climb through a window. Tonight, we are learning her name, Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran. It is still hard to believe that it was the President of the United States himself who sent this crowd to the Capitol, inciting the day of rage.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
But Trump did not go with his followers. He went back to the White House to watch the events on television. He had hoped to prevent the inevitable, Congress counting the electoral votes and certifying Joe Biden as winner of the election. At 8 p.m., with smoke still hanging in the air, Congress went back into session, determined to complete the people's business.
Let's get back to work.
Lawmakers clearly shaken, Utah Senator Mitt Romney unsparing as he denounced the chaos as an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
We gather due to a selfish man's injured pride. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth.
Lindsey Graham once denounced Trump, only to embrace and defend him at every turn. But a violent throng of Trump supporters storming the Capitol was a bridge too far.
All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the president and the vice president of the United States on January the 20th.
And in the wee hours, Vice President Mike Pence made it official.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden, Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defiled the seat of American democracy. To those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country. And to those who broke the law, you will pay. We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high, but now tempers must be cooled and calm restored. We must get on with the business of America. My campaign vigorously pursued every legal avenue to contest the election results. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. In so doing, I was fighting to defend American democracy. I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation. 2020 has been a challenging time for our people. A menacing pandemic has upended the lives of our citizens, isolated millions in their homes, damaged our economy, and claimed countless lives. Defeating this pandemic and rebuilding the greatest economy on earth will require all of us working together. It will require a renewed emphasis on the civic values of patriotism, faith, charity, community, and family. We must revitalize the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that bind us together as one national family. To the citizens of our country, serving as your president has been the honor of my lifetime. And to all of my wonderful supporters, I know you are disappointed, but I also want you to know that our incredible journey is only just beginning. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Tonight, federal agents and police releasing these images in a desperate hunt for the people seen inside the Capitol during the siege.
USA! USA!
And tonight, we're learning just how dangerous the situation was. More than 80 people arrested, 5 firearms recovered, including a military-style assault rifle, 2 powerful functioning pipe bombs, and 11 Molotov cocktails, which authorities say were, quote, ready to go. And there may be national security implications. Federal prosecutors saying today a trove of items stolen, including potentially sensitive information. The new details coming as there are tough questions about what was, by all accounts, a near total collapse of security.
The men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department went into a situation that was already out of control.
There were posts warning of violence on social media, on right-wing websites, from groups like the Boogaloo and the Proud Boys. The Anti-Defamation League put out a release earlier this week outlining specific threats to members of Congress. As early as December 19th, President Trump encouraging supporters to come, tweeting, "Be there, we'll be wild." More than 50 officers were hurt clashing with the mob. But there are also videos that appear to show officers moving the barricades aside.
Oh, there we go.
Another one in a rioter's selfie. Bipartisan outrage. Senate Majority Leader McConnell saying steps have to be taken to address the, quote, shocking failures in the Capitol's security posture and protocols.
When the day dawned in D.C., the nation expected a very different kind of drama to play out, with some Republicans planning to object to the Electoral College vote count. By mid-morning, thousands of Trump supporters were gathering for a so-called Save America march, not far from the White House. There to protest President Trump's November election defeat, just 14 days before Joe Biden's inauguration. At noon, the president took to the stage, fueling the fire of anger and dissent.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen.
He called on Congress to reject the election results, an election he lost by 7 million votes, but continues to call rigged, despite zero evidence.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Meanwhile, at the Capitol, armed crowds gathered, and police were grossly underprepared for what was about to happen, despite the known threats posed by some protesters.
Madam Speaker, the Vice President and the United States Senate.
By 1:30, the House and Senate broke off to debate separately after GOP Representative Paul Gosar and Texas Senator Ted Cruz objected to Arizona's Electoral College votes for Joe Biden.
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
On the Senate side, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell bluntly confronted his Republican colleagues.
The voters, the courts, and the states have all spoken. If we overrule them, it would damage our republic forever.
As debate continued outside, President Trump supporters were arriving, and the mood had distinctly changed.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
Demonstrators soon climbing the walls and scaffolding, violently confronting law enforcement.
It was clear that the crowd was intent on causing harm to our officers by deploying chemical irritants on police.
While inside, the vice president was whisked away by the Secret Service. As the mob moved in, the entire Capitol went into lockdown. But protesters were already inside, some carrying Confederate flags. The law enforcement presence was no match for the sheer size of the invasion, and now many facing criticism as images of them showing little resistance are emerging. This man taking a selfie with a Capitol police officer as other police stand nearby. In the House chamber, lawmakers huddled in the balcony as armed security barricaded the door. At one point, shots fired. A protester hit. She eventually dies.
They brought out a woman on a stretcher, rushed her inside. We did see blood gushing.
And there's now smoke coming from over by the House gallery.
For hours, while his supporters rampaged through the Capitol, breaking onto the Senate floor, into Nancy Pelosi's office, the president said nothing. By 4 o'clock, President-elect Biden publicly called on Trump to stop the mob.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege.
Minutes later, Trump released a video statement full of lies about the election, but telling them to go home. It was eventually taken down from all social media sites.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
We love you. You are special. Those were the words of the president about the people that had just stormed the Capitol building. So a very strange turn of events.
By 5 o'clock, law enforcement had started reclaiming control of some parts of the Capitol grounds. Multiple sources telling ABC News President Trump repeatedly refused to send in the National Guard before finally agreeing in the late afternoon. 6 o'clock, a citywide curfew ordered by the mayor went into effect. A total of just 14 arrests by Capitol Police, 13 for suspected unlawful entry into the Capitol. D.C. police saying they carried out 26 arrests on Capitol grounds. But much of the Trump-supporting mob simply walked away.